Hello all and welcome to the Rails Board meeting. I'm Alex Vancina, President of the Rails Board, and I call this meeting to order on Friday, July 28th at 1 p.m. Emily, would you please call roll?
Sure. Monica Falcon.
Here.
Rosie Camargo. Here. Jean Carroll. Here. Alice Creason.
Here.
Gwen Gregory.
Here.
Robin Hellenthal.
Here.
Diane Hollister. Jennifer Hovanek.
Here.
Renee Leva. Julie
Here.
Millivek, sorry. Thomas Stack.
Here.
Alex Vancina.
Here.
Vanessa Villarreal. Karen Voidick.
Here.
Catherine Yanikowski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Emily. Now we're on to recognition of guests and announcements. Let's start with guests here in Burr Ridge.
Monica Harris, Rails.
Sharon Swanson, Rails.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Emily Feister, Rails.
Ola Gronsky, Rails.
Laura Nemeth, Rails.
Ryan Hempel, Rails.
Emily, would you please read the names of any guests attending via Zoom?
Yes, we have Dan Bostrom and Ann Slaughter from Rails and Gwen Harrison from the Illinois State Library.
Thank you. If Emily has not read your name, please announce yourself and put your name in the chat. Moving on to public comments. Are there any public comments in Burr Ridge? If not, any public comments from Zoom participants? Hearing none. Emily, did you receive any public comments by email?
Did not.
Thank you. The Zoom chat will be disabled after the public comments section. Are there any other announcements at this time? Okay, next up, we have Tom with oath of office and election of officers.
Okay, will the newly elected board members please stand and recite the oath of office?
I do solemnly swear that I will
I will
support
support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Directors of the Reaching Across Illinois Library System according to the best of my ability.
Thank you and welcome to the Rails Board. We look forward to working with you all, believe me. Now we're on to the election of officers. The slate of the officers recommended by the Rails Nominating Committee is as follows. Alex Vancina, President. Gwen Gregory, Vice President. Diane Hollister, Secretary. Karen Voitek, Treasurer. The floor is open to nominations. Are there any nominations at this time?
Julie for secretary.
Or did I did find something wrong.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
Julie Millivek for secretary. Sorry, that was our fault.
Julie Millivek should be secretary.
Okay. Thank you.
Apologies.
Okay, so let's do that again. Alex Vancina, President. Gwen Gregory, Vice President. Julie Millivek, Secretary. Karen Voitek, Treasurer. Okay, the floor is open to nominations. Are there any nominations at this time? If there are no other nominations, may I have a motion to approve the slate of officers as presented?
I'll make a motion. Do we approve that?
Thank you, Robin.
I'll second Alice.
Alice, thank you, Alice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is approved. Congratulations to the new officers of the Rail Board.
Thank you, Tom. We'll move on to the consent agenda. You'll notice that the consent agenda includes minutes of our June meeting. It is generally agreed by legal counsel that no one need abstain from approving minutes if your fellow board members who were in attendance at those meetings raise no objections to the minutes. Please note that the Rails board meeting schedule is also included on the consent agenda. Anyone wish to move any item to the regular agenda for further discussion? If not, may I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Karen.
Karen, thank you.
Second, Tom.
Tom, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
We have to have a roll call. Don't we?
Oh, this one's a roll call.
Yeah.
Emily, thank you.
Roll call vote because there's, we're
Money.
doing the financial.
Yes.
Rosie Camargo. Jean Carroll.
Aye.
Alice Creason.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory.
Yes.
Robin Hellenthal.
Yes.
Jennifer Vanek.
Yes.
Julie Melnick.
Yes.
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
Karen Hoyt.
Yes.
Catherine Yanikowski.
Yes.
Monica Caldecott.
Yes.
And Alex Van Steen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Sharon Swanson with the Rails Financial Report.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, all. I'm going to try to project, but if you can't hear me, just shout out and I will try to raise the volume additionally because I'm naturally soft-spoken. You will find the June financials in your board packet. June is the conclusion of our fiscal year 2023. And please note that these reports are preliminary and unaudited. There may be some additional items that are recorded as June vendor invoices come in and are paid in late July. But all should be minor with the exception of the final quarterly payment to Autograph More Illinois platform. This will add an additional $36,674 to the other contractual services line. But this line will still remain $142,000 below budget. So it doesn't change the results overall, but it does shift things slightly. The June 30th general fund cash and investment balance of $22.9 million would fund approximately 20 months of budgeted fiscal year 24 operations. And as I'm going to mention later in my board development topic, the board several years ago had set a goal of 18 months of reserves. So we are almost at that goal with that 20 months of reserves. General fund revenues through June of over $16.2 million were approximately 1.1 million above budget. And of course, this is mostly due to investment income, which is a little over $814,000 above budget. Because we had budgeted at a very conservative rate, which was on par with where we were at the time. But then the Federal Reserve attempted to combat inflation by doing a series of interest rate hikes. In fact, since March of 2022, they've raised interest rates in total 525 basis points, which is historic and very significant. And was great for us with what we have in the bank. And the Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates again by another 25 basis points before the calendar year. The last thing that I heard is this should be the last one before they start declining, but we will see. They've gotten a little bit more non-specific about that as of late. Rails will have one of its treasury note investments and 4 of its CDs mature this next week. And the preliminary plan as of now, pending the rates at that point, is to reinvest the almost $2 million in treasury notes or CDs again, whichever is at a greater rate of interest at that point. And these are CDs and investments that are held with PMA. That's where we do our investment, and our investment portfolio is approximately 4.2 million or so right now, which is a very, very tiny piece of our total funds. So we plan to, at that point, reinvest those funds in investments over a period of 2 years to lock in this peak in interest rates for a longer period of time. And as I said, Rails has approximately $4 million that is spread between treasury notes and CDs with PMA. The revenues being above budget was also due to an account called lease proceeds. And we do have we have a balance in that account now. It's completely offset on the expenditure side by the lease capital outlay account. And the only reason why we have this, it doesn't change the bottom line, but the only reason why we have this is we signed a new lease for our Bolingbrook location. And the lease accounting standard that went into effect this last year, GASB 87, requires that we record this both on the general fund side as well as our government-wide side. So it doesn't have any effect on the bottom line, but it does gross up the statement of revenues and expenditures, unfortunately. And the lease standard requires that we capitalize any sort of leases that we enter into as assets and then spread the cost of those, amortize them over the term of the lease evenly. The above budget revenues were also due to the unbudgeted L2 maintenance and development grants, grant that we received, as well as the world language cataloging grant. And these were special grants separate from our APC grant that we received from the state library to specifically fund those projects, since they are statewide projects that benefit everyone, not just our service area. And Rails has once again been approved for these grants in fiscal year 2024. We just got approval, and we will receive $45,627 for the world language cataloging program and $53,611 for the maintenance and development of L2. These grants, we did not budget to receive the grant funds for fiscal year 2024 because we had not been approved yet, if they were still pending. And we were unsure whether they would be approved. So we were conservative, but we did budget the expenses for these. So these above budget revenues were also partially offset by below budget fees for services and materials. And this was due primarily to the RSA support grant budget to actual comparison that is done at the end of each fiscal year. So we have support grants for each of our LSAPs that we support. RSA gets the most number of services. And this includes, as Ann mentioned earlier, staffing, us providing staffing and those staff being our staff. So what's written into the support grant is that we true up actual cost versus the budgeted cost for those staff at the end of each year. And whatever the difference is, RSA will either owe us or we will owe them the difference to get us up to the total support that was budgeted for them and allocated for them. So this year, Rails is refunding RSA $32,945. And this is mostly due to an extended vacancy of one of their staff positions during the year, but it has been filled as of June. General fund expenditures through June of almost $14.3 million were nearly $429,000 below budget. And this is due to lower contractual services expenditures from a less than budgeted increase in our contract with our delivery outsourcing contractor, which was great news and has continued to benefit us. And this is also due to not having yet incurred expenses for the Verso Consortia product that Ann mentioned earlier to provide automation to under automated and non-automated libraries under the Find More Illinois umbrella, and not having had the opportunity to award any Find More Illinois joining incentives. And also just other under budget subscriptions and fees in this line. These below budget expenditures were also due to personnel falling below budget from a delay in filling several positions that were budgeted for the entire fiscal year. And this is partially offset by increased recruiting and temporary help costs due to delivery staff turnover, as well as above budget executive director search cost during fiscal year 2023. Vehicle expenditures as a whole are below budget due to fuel prices falling well below the budgeted $4.25 per gallon for the majority of the fiscal year. Although I did hear this morning in the Cook County area, we're up to $4.25 per gallon. So we're coming back up. And we did budget $4.25 yet again for fiscal year 2024. So we should be covered no matter where it goes, but it worked in our favor in 2023 for sure. And this, of course, is partially offset by above budget vehicle repairs due to the aging of our fleet. Most of our fleet is over the 200,000 mile mark. We have not been able, we budgeted in fiscal year 2023, but we weren't able due to market shortages to replace the vehicles that we needed to replace. But in fiscal year 2024, we have budgeted the purchase of 12 vehicles, which should help to stem this expense that keeps coming through. And this, these under budget expenses were also due to travel being lower than estimated due to lower than estimated mileage reimbursements for in-state and lower than estimated out-of-state airfare and lodging cost. Additional cost for switching to the capital projects fund from the general fund, additional cost for the furniture that we furnished the 2 new areas in Burr Ridge were incurred in June. This was the last 50% of those costs that we paid earlier in the year. This was unbudgeted, but more than offset by that amount that we budgeted for the vehicle purchases. And we were not able to make those during the year. Replacement video conferencing equipment and service center server replacements were budgeted in fiscal year 2023, but will be incurred in fiscal year 2024. And this was mostly due to vendor delays getting us samples and things that we needed to put out the RFP. And lastly, carpet replacements for the Coal Valley and the East Peoria facilities were budgeted for fiscal year 2023, but were temporarily deferred with the deep carpet cleaning. So that came in under budget as well. And that's just about all that I have. Are there any questions? And I'm sorry, that was a lot. I was particularly long-winded due to year end.
Yeah.
I'm not normally this way. I can assure the new board members.
Okay, if there are no questions, we'll move on to reports. I have no report at this time, and the committee reports were included in your packet. Are there any questions about the committee reports? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to Monica with the Rails monthly report.
Thank you, Alex, and hello to all of you. I did want to note before we start on the Rails report that at the end of your report you received this month, the consortia reports are included. Just for information, we submit those to the board on a quarterly basis, so you won't see those every single month, but 4 times a year you will see reports from the consortium. So that's what's reflected there. In addition to what you saw in the report here, I just wanted to add a couple of brief things. One, as Sharon just noted in her financial report, we did receive from the Illinois State Library and Secretary Janulius, they approved the allocation funds for Rails. We're very grateful for that, as well as those approved L2 and World Cataloging grants, which will really go a long way for Rails. In addition to some of the things that were reported here, I just wanted to note Ann Slaughter and I yesterday made a trip down to Champaign to meet with Leslie Bednar and Troy Brown of the Illinois Heartland Library system, and then also with Ann Craig of Carly, where we met to discuss broadband and digital equity within Illinois and how our organizations could come together to support the need for more work around broadband and Illinois libraries specifically for libraries. And I think we came up with some really interesting ideas. Basically, we put our ideas into kind of 4 buckets of potential grants and then started to talk about who might fund some of those grants and how we could move them forward. So very excited about that progress and excited about hopefully what we can come up with that group. Also wanted to note that we were able to attend the Prairie Cat Delegates Assembly at the New Lenox Library on Wednesday. It was a nice opportunity to be able to talk to all of them about Rails and things that are coming up in Rails in the coming year. We were also able to share some information about the eRead program. As many of you know from some of our previous reports, Prairie Cat joined eRead as a consortia recently, which was really a wonderful add to the program. And so we were able to talk to them about some of the changes that are coming to eRead this fall with the Boundless platform. So wanted to thank Carolyn for inviting us and note that it was a great experience to be able to talk to so many people in person in New Lenox. The things I wanted to call your attention to in the report itself, you may have noted that we have 2 new additions to our Find More Illinois program with the Marseille Public Library and the Schaumburg Township District Library. So as of the most recent catalog updates, the number of items available through Find More Illinois is now at 2.3 million items. So that program is growing and again, becoming a very robust spot for resource sharing. You also probably saw some of the robust growth in terms of reservations in our Explore More program. So you might normally see we have upwards of 300 or 400 reservations in the program. Since adding the Chicago Public Library to the program, we're now up to 2,710 reservations were made in Explore More Illinois in the month of June. And so there are so many more attractions in that program and so many more people making reservations. So we're really excited to see the growth and really excited to have Chicago Public Library on as a partner. So wanted to make sure that you saw that as well. Yes, Gwen.
I just had a question. So is Explore More Illinois open to academic libraries now?
There is a pilot program for community college libraries that's happening at the moment. So we're about to add our third community college library to that pilot program, but we have been working with Carly in order to make that more expansive. So our hope is to be able to offer it to more eventually once we're able to do that.
Great, that
Yeah.
sounds great.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We're really excited to add that as well. eRead Illinois. So you were able to see what the eRead renewal period, it did conclude at the end of June. So as of July 11th, 905 libraries have now renewed their eRead subscription. That includes 585 school libraries. Libraries that have canceled or not renewed their subscription will have their Access 360 sites disabled by the end of July. And as we noted, all of our eRead libraries are moving to Boundless, which is the new app and platform, on September 26th. So there will be a lot of communications coming through in August in terms of trainings for libraries as they get used to the new platform. But we're really excited about some of the technological expansions and updates that we've heard about from Baker and Taylor, and we're excited to see it in person and also to help our libraries transition through that change. And let's see, you may have noted we put together some talking points around the decennial committees on local government efficiency. This is something that came out of the meet and greet sessions that we had, where some folks who were putting together those reports for their libraries were interested in how to communicate some of the efficiencies that they received through their membership in Rails. So we put together a set of talking points that people have the option, if they so choose, to include in their decennial reports, so they can show the different ways that their library, by participating in Rails, are able to create efficiencies for their own local government institutions. We shared those out and they're available on the Rails website as well, if anyone has any interest in sharing. And then finally, I just wanted to note, of course, that we have a new associate executive director. You have him sitting here at the end of the table. So Joe Philippek has been promoted and joined. Congratulations, Joe. We're excited to have Joe on board. This, of course, does create another opening within our organization, but Joe will be operating in a dual capacity until we're able to find his replacement. We've also recently posted a replacement position for Mary Witt, who is our Director of Marketing and Communications, who retired mid-July. So we have a lot to do here at Rails, but we're very excited about the future and where we're moving. Any questions about the report at all? Okay, you may have noted, one thing I should say is that when Mary was here, we had a more robust monthly report. So this was put together just as an executive director's report. Typically, I put together a report and then Mary puts together a more general view of Rails that is then shared as the This Month at Rails package. In the interim, before we have a new person in this report, I'm just putting together both into kind of one giant report. But we expect to have a more expansive report once that position has been filled. So if you noted that change, that is there.
Thank you, Monica.
Of course.
And we'll move on to the report from the State Library. Gwen?
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's good. It's good to see you guys.
Hi, Gwen.
I have a robust report. I don't know how much of this you want to hear, but here we go. Secretary Giannoulias recently sent award letters for fiscal year 24 grant funding. Press releases will be issued in the coming days, but here's a preview for your system and members. We are processing the fiscal year 24 grant rewards. First, congratulations to Rails for receiving the system area and per capita grant for over $11 million, the support for cataloging services grant for over $45,000, and the support to L2 grant for over $53,000. The system area and per capita payment schedule will be considerably different this year. There is no longer a live and learn fund, so payments are expected to be issued much faster, which I think is good news. 20 Rails member public libraries were awarded $325,717 for Project Next Generation grants. These libraries include Beardstown Houston Memorial Library, Bourbonnais Public Library, Chicago Ridge Public Library, Peoria Public Library, Wooddale Public Library District, among many others. 4 radio stations in Chicago, DeKalb, Macomb, and Rock Island received $162,453 for Talking Book and Braille Radio Information Services grants to support content for people of all ages with a vision, disability, and who are eligible for talking book services. The stations, they read content that is not normally heard on local news broadcasts. So that includes obituaries, grocery store ads, want ads, those kinds of things. This is what you get through this service. Additionally, many academic agencies and organizations within Rails were awarded adult volunteer literacy grants, Penny Severance family literacy grants, and workplace skills enhancement literacy grants. However, the grant at academic institutions goes to the adult education department rather than the library. We unfortunately had to cancel the Illinois State Library Advisory Committee meeting this month. There were technology issues, and currently they are being addressed by the Secretary of State's Information Technology staff. We are looking forward to Directors University next week in Springfield. We support this continuing education activity with grant funds, as well as look forward to meeting the participants and sharing information about the state library grants and services. Let's see here. Oh, information about the fiscal year 2023 system annual report has been emailed to the system with reports due September 30th. And then this is some fun stuff. What does cotton candy, elephant ears, and corn dogs have in common? Yep, you're right. In August, all eyes turn to the fairgrounds in Springfield for the Illinois State Fair, which runs August 10th through the 20th. We've been working with Illinois Reads, of which Secretary Giannoulias is the honorary chair, to schedule authors reading at the Secretary of State's tent. We've got some fantastic authors that have been scheduled, which include on Friday, August 11th, Candace Fleming, Eric Ronman will be reading Honey Be Mine, and Steve Majes will be reading ABC Animals. We've got more authors scheduled on August 12th. Skylar Shrimp, she will be reading 3 Strike Summer with Kayla Ankrum. She'll be reading Darling. Sunday, August 13th, Alex Perry will be reading Pig Hearted, and Barbara Benz will be reading Courage. On Saturday, August 19th, Tamara Barker will be reading Babies Around the Word Dancing. So if you are at the fair on any of these dates, please stop by the Secretary's tent between 11 and 3 and enjoy the authors. And on another note, one of our beloved consultants has passed away. I don't know, we were talking about this earlier, but Neil Kelly, who was on our staff for many, many years, we attended his homegoing services today. So I just thought I would add that for some of you that may know him. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Gwen, this is Monica at Rails. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the loss of your colleague. And so thank you for sharing that with us as well. But I also wanted to offer my thanks to the secretary and to the team at the Illinois State Library for the grant support for Rails. We're so pleased, and we're really excited that we know we can do wonderful work in resource sharing with that grant money. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're looking forward to working with you guys with another successful year. You guys do good work. All of our systems do. All of our libraries do. Thank you.
Yeah.
More questions for Gwen?
All right, thank you, Gwen. We'll move on to new business and board committee assignments. You have the draft list of committees and members, as well as the tentative schedule for their committee meetings in your packet. As you can see, we have a few openings for board members. Specifically, we need one more board member on the policy committee and one on the universal service committee. If anyone is interested, please let us know, or you can email Monica after you have time to look at the schedule and the charge for each committee.
And I did want to thank all of our board members, including our new ones, are all signed on to at least one committee, which is wonderful. And so I know we're going to be able to do a lot of really great work this year.
Okay. Next, we have election of an at-large member to the executive committee. The bylaws state the executive committee includes one at-large member, and I would like to nominate Renee Leyva for that seat. Unless there are any objections, may I have a motion and a second to elect Renee Leyva to the at-large seat on the executive committee?
So moved.
Julie, thank you.
I'll second.
Tom, thank you.
I have a question. Does he have to be here to accept this nomination?
I don't believe so. No.
If he did plan on being here, he had a sick child.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. On to 9.3, disposal of surplus property.
It's Anne.
Oh. Hi.
I'm here and on Zoom. So you can see in your packet a very long list of surplus property that we are requesting your approval to dispose of properly. That equipment dates back pretty far as well, when Rails was formed. 12 years ago, we inherited all of the technology equipment from the previous systems. And it is typical practice in the IT department to hang on to older decommissioned equipment for a while in case it's needed for any kind of spare parts. It's like same concept as like auto repair, right? Sometimes you can mine parts out of old tech equipment or use it as replacements. So it's a lot of this stuff has been hanging around for a while and is all fully depreciated. And so in the in service of getting all of this cleaned out, they've all passed their useful life and aren't usable by us or really anyone else. It wouldn't be there's nothing on this list that we could responsibly sell to anyone for them to make use of. So this is the typical procedure for equipment disposal in Rails policy, as well as the state administrative rules. So it is a part of this procedure to request your approval to dispose. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
What is the process for disposing of those? Is the recycling company that picks the equipment up here, or do we typically take it?
It depends, because this is such a large amount, we might end up doing some or all of the transporting. But we typically will call a recycler and have them come out. So it just sort of depends on quantities and what exactly we're disposing.
Sure. Okay, in that case, may I have a motion and a second to approve the disposal of surplus property.
I move that we dispose of surplus property. Monica. I'll
Thank
second the motion.
Robin, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. And we'll move on to Dan with the new member application.
Hi, everybody. I'm here on Zoom. So good afternoon. This is a really fun one. This is a specialized library, the Stony Island Arts Bank. It's a cultural center on the south side of Chicago. If you've never seen pictures, I would, after this, I would go Google Stony Island Arts Bank library. It is beautiful. It's in a former bank building, and they have some really unique collections that they're hoping to make more available through interlibrary loan and by joining the system. So Heather Hummons is my contact there. She knows a lot about Rails from her time at DePaul University. We had a great conversation about services and you know what she's hoping to get from Rails, and I just think that they would make a fantastic addition to the system. So can I answer any questions about this member request?
Are there certain criteria for new members that they have to satisfy?
Yes, they do. Yep. And those are all laid out in library law. And that includes things like the location needs to be centralized. There needs to be, you know, like a room full of books. There needs to be at least one employee paid 15 hours a week. There needs to be some system of organization of the materials. There needs to be some ongoing collection budget or financial support for the collection. I'm forgetting one. but yeah, those are generally the rules. And they are all on the Rails website. If you go to become a member, the become a member section of the Rails website.
Good question.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve full membership for the Stony Island Arts Bank and request final approval from the State Library?
I motion. Second, Jen.
Rosie and Jen, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. Moving on to statement supporting appropriate staffing for school libraries. Monica?
Thank you, Alex. So in your packet, you saw both a memo from myself and then an actual statement from ISLE. So just a little bit of background on this. From time to time, we are sometimes asked if we are in support of a statement from one of our partner organizations. ISLE is definitely one of the partner organizations we work with very frequently. Sometimes in the past, we have signed on to those statements of support because of our relationships with these organizations. But we wanted to start kind of a new process. And so that's why this is coming to you in this way today. So just for a little bit of background around this, ISLE has issued a statement of support in favor of certified school librarians in the past. We signed on to that. This one is specifically for paraprofessional statement of support. So in many libraries, or school libraries, what we are hearing from ISLE is that many of the paraprofessionals that are in those spaces are not being replaced when those folks retire or leave the library. And so this statement of support is meant to focus on that particular issue. We brought this to the Rails Advocacy Committee before having it brought here to the Rails Board. The Advocacy Committee reviewed this statement at their meeting on July 13th and approved, unanimously voted to recommend this to the Rails Board to approve the library paraprofessional statement of support. Robin Hellenthal is our chair of that committee, and we have several other members of that committee here today. Would any of you like to share anything about your experience with that or anything about that recommendation?
I would just like to reiterate how important this statement is and how not funding, but personnel in school libraries are being cut left and right. And one example I'll give you is District 214, a very large and well-respected high school district that has 6 high schools like Buffalo Grove High School and, Rolling Meadows High School, like big, 3,000 or more students in them. And this school district won the American Association of School Librarians School District of the Year award like around 4 years ago. And now their board is deciding to eliminate all paraprofessional support in all of their high schools. So there's already, over the years, they've gone from more than one professional librarian down to a single professional librarian in every school. And now, to make matters worse, they're taking away 100% of any support staff from those professional librarians. So you would have a person who is probably feeling like they're drowning. They're the single librarian to handle all circulation, everything, all teaching, all collection development, all study hall supervision, all teacher request, everything, that single person. And so lest anyone think that this issue is just like, oh, that poor school over there or that little school over there. It isn't. It's a growing problem. So I'm very glad that Rails is adding our voice to ISLE, which is my professional association, to say that libraries cannot effectively serve any patron without support staff needed.
Thank you, Monica. I know this request originally came to Dan Bostrom in his role as member engagement manager. Dan, is there anything else that you would add about the statement of support that we need to know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do just kind of want to note, you have the facts in there from the Illinois State Board of Education and their recommendation that there be one certified school librarian for every 600 high school students and one for every 450 elementary school students. That's honestly, that's not really something that they enforce. That's a recommendation from them. And so, ISLE has really fought an uphill battle to try to get this, to try to get more knowledge of this problem and more awareness of this problem And I do think that this is just another tool that we can sort of use to help spread the word about all the things that are going on. I think, IL's done a really good job recently in the last, at least a couple of years to try to like figure out tactics to make more people aware of this. They originally reached out to me because they've been emailing like principals, superintendents, school boards, whenever they find out about a new or a position that's being eliminated or a retirement or something like that. They will copy me on that email, and I will just send a copy of the link to Rail's statement of support. So I think, I think we can always help them and always do more to make sure that people are aware of this problem and what's going on.
Yeah, I want to reiterate the discussion with the advocacy committee. I think was a really strong one. And there was a lot of support at that advocacy committee for signing on to this. It was really a robust discussion. So I wanted to share that as well. But any questions for anybody, either for myself, for Dan, for anyone from the advocacy committee on this statement?
I will also say, I think it's very appropriate that when Rails is asked for support to a statement, that it does come to the board, because I think then we can fulfill that ambassador role that we're called upon if we know the issues that other organizations are hoping to have our support on them, right? Not just us as a board, but even us, each person individually now knows more about that. So I think this is very appropriate that this kind of statement and on any future things would come to the board.
Great.
Right. May I have a motion to add Rail support to the statement supporting appropriate staffing for school libraries?
So moved, Julie.
Second, Karen.
Karen, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, let's take a short break and reconvene about 10 minutes at 1:52. All right, welcome back. And we are on to item 10, unfinished business. We have no unfinished business to discuss this month. So next up, we have Sharon with our board development topic this month, which is the Rails financial report and budget.
Good afternoon again. It's the Sharon Show today. And I finally have a captive audience to teach everyone about accounting. Great. So we thought that it might be helpful with the new board being seated, as well as for the old board, just a good refresher to give a little overview of the financial reports, including the composition of the reports, the funds that we use, tips for reading the report, some of the specifics of each, as well as the budget and the process that we go through with the budget and the board's responsibilities regarding that, and some other boards' responsibilities for finances. Just as a little premise, Rails' accounting is done on a modified accrual basis. So the accrual basis is used by for-profit businesses or government enterprise funds that are run like a business. So for instance, the LSATs use full accrual basis accounting. But Rails uses the modified accrual basis of accounting, which combines both aspects of cash basis accounting, which is used mostly for tax purposes, and as well as accrual accounting that for-profit businesses use. And for instance, under modified accrual accounting, Rails can recognize area per capita grant revenues within the fiscal year, as long as they are received within 60 days of the fiscal year end. So that's one instance where it's a little bit different from full accrual accounting. Rails presents financial statements in the annual audit for both the government-wide statements as well as the fund financial statements. So two different views of the financials. The government-wide statements have a long-term focus, and they show activities of the government as a whole, including non-monetary items such as the net pension asset or liability compensated absences, capital assets, facility lease amortization, which I touched on in my report. So it's those things that really don't affect us monetarily, but have a longer-term focus and a longer-term view of the organization. The fund financial statements, of course, are the opposite. They have a shorter term focus, and these are the ones that are presented monthly to the board in the report, and that's where I'll be focusing today. So to use as an exhibit, if you can look at your monthly report, my monthly report to you, I'll be going through it, but I did just want to give a little bit more of a premise. Rails uses 3 different type of funds. We use the general fund, and this is used to pay all of the operating expenses for the organization. And then we use the capital projects fund for things like the vehicle purchases that I mentioned earlier in my report. And this capital projects fund, the funding for it was established in June 2015 with the net proceeds from the sales of the Wheeling, Shorewood, East Peoria, and Geneva predecessor system facilities. And the board's thought at the time was those were capital assets. When they were sold, it needs to be recycled back into capital purchases for the organization, back into that capital budget. The board has not funded the capital projects fund since this initial transfer because we consistently make capital purchases, but the proceeds from the sale of those buildings was so large, we've just gradually eaten it down. But following the purchase of the 12 vehicles during fiscal year 2024, and another large vehicle purchase that we undoubtedly need to make in fiscal year 2025, the board may want to consider that to refund that fund at some point. And by large capital purchase, I mean $900,000 for the purchase of 12 vehicles. So it's going to significantly impact that. We also have the special revenue fund. And this is the fund that is used to account for our special grants that we get outside of the area per capita grant, such as the cataloging grant that I mentioned before, the World Language Cataloging Grant, and the L2 Maintenance and Development Grant. These aren't accounted for in the special revenue fund now because they are approved after the budget is approved. So we don't have time to factor that in. But several years ago, it was used to account for the census grant that we received. So the first item, going back to the report, in my report, after my written report, is the cash position report. So the cash position report shows how long Rails could pay its operating expenditures with the cash on hand at the end of the month, assuming no additional APC grant revenues from the state. So this is worst case scenario. This is how much we could fund of our budget, of our monthly planned budget. It takes total cash and investments, deducting the cash that the Rails board designated specifically for capital projects. And then the Rails board in the past, as I mentioned in my report, has had a goal of 18 months coverage in the general fund. And we have 20 months coverage right now. So the coverage has, I did want to mention in the past, the coverage has decreased to 9 months. So this can fluctuate. And when it decreased to 9 months, this was during the state budget impasse when cash flows weren't flowing as they normally do. But we have had, for the last 3 years, consistently received our entire fiscal year grant within the same year of the grant. So cash flows have greatly improved since then. But I did want to mention that we could see a little bit of fluctuation here. So I did want to move on to the next report. So this next report shows the balance of Rails' cash and investments and the detail of all of Rails' accounts. The account that holds the bulk of Rails' funds is the Wintrust Money Market account. This has currently a $20.8 million balance. And this is earning a rate of interest that tracks just above, barely above the Illinois Funds rate of interest. So it's tracking with the market rate of interest. Rails has both a checking account and a money market account with Wintrust. And Rails tries to maintain a minimum balance in the checking account to maximize interest income. So it tries to maximize that balance in the money market account. The funds with Wintrust are collateralized at 103% through 2 pledged securities, as well as the way Wintrust is structured. It's like a CDARS type bank, where they have a network of banks and they spread the balance of your accounts between those network of banks at $250,000 increments. And then anything that's left, they collateralize with separate collateral with pledged securities, but keeping those balances below that $250,000 FDIC insurance limit gets us insured for those funds so that we can collateralize less. The next report is a statement of net assets, which shows Rails's assets, liabilities, and fund balances at the end of the month for both of Rails's active funds, the general fund and the capital projects fund. As you can see, cash and investments are Rails's largest assets. The accounts receivable balance, you will notice, is rather high, and this is due to the June billings that we do in service of the Electronic Content Consortia, the ECC consortia that I mentioned earlier that the Rails Finance Department services. And I mentioned earlier, this is one of the 3 cooperative / consortia that Rails Finance supports, besides the accounting services that we provide for 2 of the 6 local library system automation programs in Rails' service area. The major liability moving down in that report is the balance of the funds held for consortium account, which does account for the pass-through activities for the Electronic Content Consortium and the Illinois Library Presents group. So the Electronic Content Consortium, the ECC group, has approximately 123 members, and the Illinois Library Presents group has approximately 211 members. So it is a significant amount of activity that we handle for them and that pass through that account. The report, moving down on the report calculates the beginning fund balance minus our deficit of revenues over expenditures to get the total fund balance. So that's where you can find that information. And then the next 2 statements in the report show the general fund and the capital projects fund revenues and expenditures. The first column shows expenditures for June, and the second column shows the year-to-date actual, and the next column shows the year-to-date budget. And the following column shows the variance between the 2 columns. And then the total budget for the year, the percentage of how much Rails has left to spend of the budget. And I just wanted to note that the most useful column for myself and the column that I refer to most in my monthly written report is the 4th column, the year-to-date budget variance. So if you're ever trying to match them up, that's where you find that information. And this shows how Rails's expenditures are tracking with the budget. The next statement shows the next 2 statements show the 2 largest sub-funds within the general fund. So those are delivery and LSAP support. Delivery does account for 32.2% of the total general fund expenditure. So it is a major thing that we do, service that we provide. As well as LSAP support. So this accounts for 16.3% of the total general fund expenditure. So together, over 48%, almost 50% of what we do as an organization and what we support. The expenditure report, which is the other report that is part of your consent agenda. So listing of the check register and all of the credit card detail is the check register is an alphabetical listing of all the payments made during the month being reported on to Rails's vendors with totals for multiple checks listed on the right-hand side. And we do put those totals in to make it simpler for you as a board to pick out some of the vendors that Rails deals with most extensively. And this report is followed by the detail, of course, of the credit card expenditures, the total of which is listed on the check register, but the check register does not print the details. So we detail those out separately for you. Moving on to the budget and a little overview of how the budget process works for the year. So we put the budget together in conjunction with the plan of service when we are putting together the area per capita grant application. So we do use zero-based budgeting. We start from scratch. We do not simply increase costs by a certain percentage as some organizations do. We reconsider everything. And we examine contracts, the amount of the increases, projected increases, talk with our vendors. And we do this line by line. And the board, I just wanted to mention the board, it's presented to the board for approval when we do, for discussion and approval when we, at the May meeting, when we put the grant application together, as Monica mentioned in her video, for questions, discussion, approval, changes, anything that's needed at that point. So the board is responsible for both reviewing and approving the budget as a part of the annual area per capita grant application. And some other things that the board is responsible for. All of the Rails board officers are authorized signers on the Rails checking account and the Rails money market account with Wintrust, along with the executive director and the associate executive director. And we normally try to call upon the treasurer first for signatures on checks. Anything that's over 10,000 requires a board level signature. We try to focus on the treasurer first, and then we have a backup signature stamp for the board president, which in this case is Alex. So he is next in line. And if we had to emergency get down to someone else, we would drive the checks to your location to get them signed, the checks over $10,000. And we do have two people on staff that sign those checks in addition to everything else that's under 10. That only requires one signature. So additionally, the board is responsible for reviewing and approving the monthly expenditure reports as mentioned at the start of each board meeting. And upon recommendation by the Rails executive director or her designee, the board is responsible for reviewing and selecting new depositories as the need arises. We haven't selected new depositories in a few years now, but it would be upon staff recommendation to the board. In addition, the board is responsible for reviewing the investment portfolio twice a year. That will be coming up in your August board packet, and it will be a report similar to what is in my monthly report, and it's just a formal review process by the board. And this is to ensure that our investment portfolio is still meeting Rails's needs and is performing well, basically. The board, in addition, is also responsible for developing and reviewing the travel policy, as Monica mentioned, and travel reimbursement rates upon recommendation from the Rail staff. And that's just periodically. It's not, there's no set schedule for that. But reviewing the investment portfolio does need to happen twice a year per the recent revisions that we made to the fiscal accountability policy. So it will be coming up in August and February every year. And almost lastly, as a part of our annual report to the Illinois State Library that is presented to the board at the September board meeting, because it's due to the State Library September 30th, the annual financial audit as well as a single audit is presented by our auditors for discussion and acceptance by the board. And currently our auditors are Lauterbach and Amen. So we do actually have the auditor come to the office and present via Zoom directly to the board. Rails does have a single audit in addition to the annual financial audit due to a portion of our APC grant revenues coming from federal LSTA funds, and that's approximately just under $2 million of our grant funds, our total 11 point some odd dollar grant, area per capita grant. And these funds, these federal funds are 100% allocated to our delivery operations, specifically delivery staff salaries. And our contractor CTS that handles the portion of our delivery service that is outsourced. So we try to make it as easy as possible on ourselves for the single audit process. And that was all that I had planned to mention, but I know I waxed long-winded. Are there any additional questions? Anything that I can answer? My original ambition was to be a teacher, so I'm dying to answer questions. Yes.
I have a question, Sharon. In light of the Silicon Valley Bank issue, has Wintrust said anything to you that they might be changing CDARS or something like that with any kind of legislation?
They actually immediately reached out to me, Tom, as soon as that hit the news, and they said, just to assure you, we are doing everything correctly. We had nothing to do, no investments with that bank. We don't recommend any CD investments with that bank. Nothing in our portfolio was even remotely associated with that bank. So just to reassure you, we are not connected in any way. So they did reach out immediately. So no changes because they never touched anything related to that.
Is there possibly any legislation changes the Wintrust might be aware of?
I would have to check and get back to you on
Okay.
that. I know that the federal government did bail out the people who had money with those banks, but they didn't save the banks because they weren't following proper practices. But there could be something coming down the line for that, but I would have to research and get back to you on that, which I definitely will do. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
I just wanted to say thank you to Sharon for this report, and just for anybody who's new to the board. So we do this kind of service of the month or board development topic or both at each of our meetings. And so you can expect a deep dive on one area of Rails every single meeting. But we do like to start the year with the finances, especially because that's such an important part of the board's role, just to make sure that you have an understanding both of how we organize and develop our own financial reports, but also that you have the opportunity to ask questions. Sharon is awesome about answering questions when you do have them. So feel free, if you do have questions, to send them through Emily or myself, or talk to Sharon at these meetings, and she can explain a little bit more about our processes and practices and how things are in place. Because it is a little bit different than, especially if you're looking at it from a public library perspective or some of these other spaces, because of the unique space that Rails is in with funding. Thank you, Sharon.
No, thank you.
Yep. Okay. We're on to Rails board member reports. This is an opportunity for board members to share news about their areas or libraries. Does anyone have anything you'd like to share this month?
I want to brag about the Richland Park Public Library District because they were a recipient of 2 grants from the Public Library Association, one for the digital literacy workshop incentives, one of 200 libraries in the country to get one of these grants. And then they were also invited to be a part of a pilot program, only one of 10 libraries in the country, for the Teens Teach Tech initiative from the Public Library Association. We have a really robust teen volunteer program, and so we're really excited to use them as our sort of guinea pigs as part of this pilot program. So very proud of Laura Van Cleve, the director at Richland Park Public Library, and her staff.
Congratulations. Awesome.
Anyone else? Okay. So moving on to our meeting recap. Next Rails board meeting is scheduled for Friday, August 25th, 2023. And the agenda for next month will include Mark Hatch with the Rails delivery update, and Janet Drucke with an update on the Service and Equities Research Project. Anything else that we need to add to the agenda for next month? In that case, if we have no further business to discuss, I'll adjourn this meeting at 2:13 p.m. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.